Hey yo, it's Willie. Welcome back. So I've spent some time rewatching Tesla's earnings call since the last video I recorded, just trying to pick out any hidden clues that I may have left behind. Now, I may be looking a little too much into this one, but something I missed during the first 2 or 3 times watching the calls was this.
Becoming self-driving via software update, I think might end up being the biggest increase in asset value of any asset class in history. We shall see. It will also have a profound impact on improving safety and on accelerating the world towards sustainable energy through vastly better asset utilization.
For those of you who may not be especially familiar with Tesla's mission as a company and may not know much about their goals and what role they're attempting to play in society, their mission statement is to, quote, accelerate the world to sustainable energy. Now, that may not seem far off from what Elon said during the call. However, in this particular instance, he added a few interesting changes to the original statement. He mentions that FSD will help through better asset utilization. To this point, I haven't heard anyone react to this online, and I think this is a super important revision that deserves a bit of context around it. But in order to understand why, I think we should take a step back and follow Tesla's philosophy, which is to break problems down using first principles thinking. So in this video, I'll be looking at a problem that Tesla is already in the process of attempting to solve and try to figure out how FSD will help through better asset utilization. The problem in this case will be batteries. And for clarity, I'm not just pulling this problem out of thin air. It was something that was talked about during the call. And here's a quick clip of when Elon had mentioned it.
So we still expect to be part or primarily chip limited this year. That's the thing. That's actually the driver. And that chip limitation should alleviate next year. And then probably we transition into a cell limitation, battery cell. It's, total gigawatt hours of cell limitation, which is when the 4680 will become very important.
So I'm sure for a lot of folks, this is more than likely a non-issue. This is like the average American hearing that there are oil shortages in the country. Most folks probably don't give a shit. And if they finally do come around to giving a shit, it's likely because they spent more on a gallon of gas than they used to, not because they're worried about the greater implications like a lack of energy resources. Then, of course, there are those who do care about oil prices and battery and chip shortages. The fact that there's a battery shortage on the horizon during the world's mass transition to electric vehicles is something that has a lot of folks trying to peep what the word is, trying to figure out how this affects the auto industry and even the economy as a whole. So with that, let's dive into this imminent and inevitable battery shortage, discuss what some of the causes and effects are that could arise from it, and how the hell FSD could possibly play a role in solving it. For starters, there's a lot to talk about in this call, and I plan to make more content around it, so be sure to click subscribe and notify to catch all the latest videos. But back to it, there was a lot on the call, and something that kind of stuck out to me was the idea that we would begin a transition from a chip shortage to a battery shortage. And I mean, logically, it's not difficult to see coming. There have been increasing investments into EVs from legacy automakers such as GM and Ford, to startups like Lucid and Rivian, and even tech companies such as Amazon. So it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that batteries will begin to bottleneck. A lot of these investors, though, are short-sighted. They typically see things 6, 12, maybe 18 months out at most. Why? Well, often it has to do with supply chain management, which I assume is already a tall task in the automotive industry because of the amount of third-party sourcing most automakers rely on. But also, it became especially difficult since COVID. And again, we're breaking this down to first principles thinking. So let's go down further than just to the level of who provides automakers with the chips. Think about the chip makers themselves and who provides them with the silicon needed to assemble the chips. Think about the parts producers for things like the infotainment systems and how their inability to deliver their products has forced companies such as BMW to have to sell vehicles without a stereo in the car. And that may seem minor, I agree, but it shows the difficulty of managing a supply chain, especially during a crisis. Now, let's sidestep a bit and look at Tesla, a company who prioritizes vertical integration above all else and has its core value set on manufacturing being their strategic advantage. how they manage themselves during these times of crisis. Quite well, in fact. They've continued to increase output, continue to improve the margins on their vehicles. Overall, it would appear as though the supply chain issues are affecting everybody but Tesla. Now, obviously, this isn't the case. Tesla has been affected as well, but they have been less affected, and that's mainly, if not entirely, attributed to their ability to look into the future and recognize the opportunity of the EV market and how demand for it would skyrocket, as it has and will continue to do for the foreseeable future. They did this before EVs were cool. Shit, Tesla made EVs cool in my opinion, but that's not the point. The point is Tesla took a strategic approach and are now reaping the benefits of early investments into things like securing battery contracts with suppliers, locking up mining contracts years ahead of the industry, and maybe most importantly, basing their vehicles around software, not just hardware, which I'll discuss in just a bit. So when Elon gets on a call and says a battery shortage is coming, he's putting out the warning to competitors while simultaneously informing the rest of us that Tesla is prepared for it. They see it coming. And I think that's important. So I hope I was able to kind of shed light on the inevitable battery shortage that will start to occur over the next few years. But I guess the question now becomes, how does full self-driving help solve this problem? Well, this goes back to a point I made a moment ago that Tesla's most important strategic move was to base their cars around software. What this allowed them to do at an early stage in the company's history was to begin gathering data. What kind of data? You name it. Battery degradation, charging habits, driving styles, climate settings, tire tread life even. They have it all. And in times we live in today, we all know just how important our data is. Side note, some companies like Facebook and Twitter started up around the same time Tesla did, which shows the foresight that founders and CEOs of some of the most prominent companies in the world today had back then. But the most important data that Tesla began gathering wasn't until they introduced autopilot, which installed 8 cameras surrounding the cars and began collecting information about the environment around them. One thing led to another, and according to Elon, Tesla is on the verge of unlocking level 4 autonomy this year, which means the cars are highly automated and would even allow a driver to fall asleep. The importance of this feat, though, is not as simplistic as it may appear. While the end goal will allow drivers to sleep in a fully autonomous vehicle, the end goal itself is to create a robot that is capable of maneuvering and interacting with the physical world around it while not causing harm to humans in the process. This is key because the cars themselves are robots. And I've said this on the channel before. This is just the initial form factor of robots that Tesla offers. And this would imply that there are currently over 2.5 million robots on the road and counting that will one night receive a software update and just like that, robotaxi enabled. This will literally overnight create an entirely new segment in the market and begin replacing any human-based driving jobs. Uber and DoorDash, but even the rental car business, because if you ever need a car, it'll be there and then just drive away when you don't. But again, we see how full self-driving plays out with cars. That's not a difficult concept to extrapolate out. But if you guys would like, I can create an entire video going down the FSD rabbit hole for the car economy and my thoughts on that. Just let me know down in the comments below. But back to how FSD helps solve the battery shortage. So I discussed before how more EV players in the game will have an obvious effect on demand for batteries. But what we didn't discuss is why battery manufacturers don't simply create more batteries. So getting back to first principles thinking, it isn't just a matter of adding more ingredients to the recipe and baking a larger cake. The ingredients themselves must first be produced in order to add them to the recipe. And with batteries, the minerals that are typically involved with producing them are extremely difficult and dangerous to mine. In addition to that, much of the world's cobalt supply was mined through the use of child labor. So there's the obvious hesitancy from companies there. In fact, Tesla pledged not to use any cobalt materials that were produced using child labor, which is both noble and risky. Risky unless you have an alternative solution. Now, I believe Tesla's alternative solution is multifaceted. At Battery Day, they discussed the invention of their 4680 cell and the transition away from using cobalt, which I also talk about in a recent video card in the corner or in the description if you're interested in that. So I won't go into that topic here. Instead, I'll focus on how full self-driving's role plays a factor, and that's through Tesla's Optimus bot. So again, full self-driving will help through better asset utilization. What does this mean? Well, with a fully autonomous, AI-powered humanoid robot, Elon believes Tesla is on the verge of pushing our society into completely reimagining what an economy is, which is currently rooted by human labor. Humans produce, humans consume. That's the economy in a nutshell. But what does it become when humans consume what the robots produced? Robots can run 24/7, almost uninterrupted. And with removable rather than integrated battery packs, the downtime of production is decreased from 16 hours a day for most human employees to nearly 0 hours a day for a robot. As Elon mentioned on numerous occasions, there could be a time where there's no longer a labor shortage because robots would fill the gaps in between and at a fraction of the cost of a human. You see, I mentioned battery shortages can be directly attributed to mineral mining. Now, if you've been paying attention, you don't have to read between the lines here. Rather than put humans, let alone children, into these dangerous environments, you could simply put countless numbers of robots that can mine the necessary minerals to produce the necessary number of batteries to then greatly reduce the price of batteries, which then greatly reduces the price of Tesla's products, which then greatly decreases the cost to consumers, which, you guessed it, accelerates the world's transition to sustainable energy. But the real kicker here is the robots are coming for you next. So there you have it. That's my theory behind how FSD will help accelerate the world to sustainable energy through better asset utilization. Let me know down in the comments below, how likely do you see this scenario playing out? Are you able to conceptualize how FSD has become a major factor to Tesla's missions? And do you believe if Tesla solves full self-driving, they could break the economy over the long run? I'm Willie, and this is Charged Up. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you on the next one. Peace.